Wow. It's so special for me to be here in South Africa. South Africa has been for almost 3 decades my number one favorite country in the world. And not only mine, yeah. There were days that 20 more years ago with my wife on a shoestring with a backpack, we would travel South Africa. And we've been coming back many times since. So this morning, actually just half an hour ago, I FaceTimed her and I said, honey, you got to see, this room 20 years ago in your wildest dreams. Could you have imagined that I'd be speaking here in South Africa in front of all these beautiful people? I said, Frank, you are not in my wildest dreams. Yeah, got to live with that. But listen, guys, on a little bit more serious note, and by the way, first, a lot of love also for the previous speaker, Miles. I think it's incredible what he's done. I'm going to take it a little bit of a different angle, a more systemic angle, a more, what's the code, what's the formula, how can we scale some of the things that he's done and some of the other, outperformers. What can we learn from them? What do they do different and that we can use? How can marketers drive more impact and drive more growth? That's what I'm going to talk about. To do that, though, I want to go back first in time. I want to go back more than a century ago and look at the role of business. What is the role of business? Have you ever asked yourself that question? What's our role as business leaders? Not only marketers, business across the board. And I think the answer doesn't have to be reinvented, it has to be dusted off. This is Port Sunlight in the UK. And in Port Sunlight, the Lever brothers, the Lever brothers together with the Van den Berg guys, they created Unilever. And this was their first factory in Port Sunlight. And as you can see on this picture, it's not just a factory, it's a whole community. There's a school, there are play yards, there are playgrounds, there are supermarkets. And when you come to think of it, the CEO or the managing director or whatever, the boss, whatever they called him, or her, probably him at the time, Mr. Lever actually, he and his wife would go shopping in the same supermarket as blue-collar employees. They would join the same sporting fields. So when he was thinking of how do I create value, it was value for the whole community, for everybody. And we've lost that a little bit. But it wasn't just in the UK. This is Hershey's. Hershey's exactly the same story, more than 100 years ago. Business wasn't a separate thing, a separate unit. There weren't shareholders who were putting all the money. No, business was an integral part of society. If business did well, society did well. And actually, I'm looking now at Europe, at the US, but I think in South Africa, there's also examples of SAB in the early days would very, very consciously and intentionally recruit single household mothers so that they could be self-employed and empowered to build a life for themselves. Normal, you would say. Why would it ever be different than that? Well, the answer lies in a statement that this guy, you know who this is? Milton Friedman. And have you ever heard of him? In 1974, he was a very influential economist. In 1974, Milton Friedman said and stated that the sole responsibility of a business is to maximize profits for the shareholders without breaking the law, that he added. And boy, was his voice heard. And boy, did Milton Friedman make an impact. What we've seen in the decades following Milton Friedman's statement is greed in all kinds of forms. incredible short-term focus, and the formula was actually quite simple. The formula was for many companies, first scale through entering new markets, entering adjacent categories, mergers and acquisitions, scale, and then ruthlessly start cutting costs. Cut costs till the bone just to boost the next quarter profit. That became the mantra. That became successful business. SAB was bought by ABI, owned by 3G, Brazilian investors. They created zero-based budgeting. I know if anyone heard of that. I think it's all a result of this. That changed, though. This is a very important day, February 22nd, 2019. Kraft Heinz, also owned by 3G, declared, after losing $10 billion of their market share value in one day, the owners declared, our business model is no longer working. We find our innovation pipelines empty, the brand equities deteriorated, we've been too much focused on the short line, too much focused on the short term, too much focused on the bottom line. Interestingly, at almost that exact same date, the Institute for Real Growth published the largest study ever done on the globe on growth, the growth study. And what we found is that growth overperformers, those that beat their competitors, direct competitors, in terms of growth over the past 3 years, that they shifted their approach and their thinking about growth. They started defining growth as creating value for all stakeholders. Your colleagues, your own people, the customers, the people that you serve, the communities in which you live and operate, and the capital markets, the shareholders, for the long run. Creating value for all stakeholders for the long run. It was amazing that almost released the same day that Kraft Heinz said, our business model is broken, and 3G openly admitted that. And it really felt like the end of an era. Finally, business should do, and was going to do, what business should do, is create value for everybody, not just the shareholders. So all good. However, today, let's look at each of those stakeholders. Colleagues, this is a picture on the screen. It's about 4 or 5 months ago, the biggest strike in automotive industry in the history. These were employees demanding, after the slump of COVID, and then the boost that followed, said, hey, why is the company and our companies making huge profits again, and aren't we getting our fair share? And they're demanding their fair share. Customers are better informed than ever before. This is here in South Africa. The 2 Rand Reach for a Dream initiative of KFC exploded in their face when one franchisee, didn't play by the rules. And they got completely exposed. And customers know, they know that these things happen. They know it's even if it's just one franchisee. This is in my home country, the Netherlands. Tata Steel, they're polluting the environment. People are getting sick in the environment. They no longer accept it. And capital markets, have they gone quiet? Not really. Unilever kicked out its last CEO, and Nelson Peltz, probably one of the most hard-headed Friedman School thinking, shareholder first leaders, is now on their board. All these stakeholders in the past years have become louder, more demanding, and more powerful. And CEOs and leadership teams, they're really in a conflict. They're on the one hand accused of doing too little for the planet, for the community, and so on, and people are pushing back, or they're accused of becoming too woke and doing too much and getting fired as a result of it. CEO of Danone is just one of the examples. Now, we interviewed over 750 business leaders. And we asked them, what's this mean? Is the pendulum swinging back? Are we going back to short-termism, shareholder primacy? We didn't only ask CMOs, we asked CEOs, CFOs, CHROs. You know that not one of them said, no, we're going back. Managing these stakeholders is a top 3 priority for all C-suite functions. What they did say, so it's important to us, understanding and managing the stakeholders, but how do we do it? Where do we start? How do we navigate those extremely difficult waters? And what do we do next? And the part that we really focused on in this study, and I'll focus on today, is and what is the role of marketing and marketing leaders in driving more humanized growth? Now, I'm going to take significantly less time to announce all the sponsors. These are them. That's it. No, but seriously, I mean, the study wouldn't have taken place without them, but I'm not going to mention all of them. Safe to say that Oxford, the Said Business School of Oxford University, was our main partner in this. And we did everything you should do when you do a global study at this scale, quant AI studies, covering more than 50 markets. But the approach that we took, the learnings that we distilled, that I'll share with you today, were based on a very simple methodology. Out of the hundreds of people and thousands that filled in questionnaires, we basically separated the growth outperformers, those that outperform in terms of top-line growth our direct competitor over the past 3 years. We put them in one bucket. And the underperformers, the laggards, on a 7-point scale, the bottom end of that scale. And we contrasted. What do winners do different than losers? Simple as that. Formula works really well for us for many, many years. The way I'll present it, and I'm not going to throw a lot of data at you, but I will show some stats just to prove how incredibly different overperformers are going at this. And please take note, because this applies as much to your industry as to anyone else. So in green is the percentage of overperformers agreeing with the statement, in red, underperformers. Okay, now here we go, the results. There is a roadmap. There are like 5 phases in driving, in getting to that more humanized growth, in outperforming your competitors by creating value for all stakeholders. The first one is to ground ourselves in the realities, but first of all, ground ourselves in who we are. What's our DNA? What's our heritage? Where do we come from? What's our roots? What do we stand for? What we will stand up for? And where won't we get involved? What's our values and what's our culture? What guides our behavior? It starts with knowing that about yourself. And then obviously, the same for all these different stakeholders. So this is a materiality matrix. Basically looking at what are the most important things, in this case around sustainability, for my customers. And those topics, how impactful are they for me as a company? Overperformers do that a lot better than underperformers. But they go further. They're not only about understanding their stakeholders, they're also about engaging with them. This is Novo Nordisk, actually Europe's most valuable company now, organizing these deep talks and really trying to understand, in this case, diabetes patients, what's their struggles look like? What role can they play with them? And keep them really close to the chest, engage with them. Gucci is taking it even a step further. They say, well, our real target audience is much younger than us leaders. So they created a shadow board of Gen Z who basically listen into board meetings and say, hey guys, here you're using words that we don't understand. You're not clicking with us. So they're keeping themselves really honest. Now, the question is, what is our role as marketers in grounding the company, in grounding the whole leadership team? Well, who else are the best window to the world? We are all about understanding consumers, understanding unaddressed needs, and then coming up with solutions. What we got to do is we got to not only do that with customers, but with other stakeholders as well. Our employees work together with HR, NGOs, all kinds of regulators, etc. And what the board needs us to do is to create like one version of the stakeholder truth, so that we operate as a leadership team with the same understanding of what's so important to them. Yeah? Okay, so we've grounded ourselves. Now it gets really interesting. We're going to reimagine future backward, if you will. We're going to zoom out and take a real long-term perspective. And then articulate a vision. The lady on this screen is called Marie Barra. She's the CEO of General Motors. She joined General Motors when she was as an intern. She's a lifer. She became CEO in 2014. And the woman is a petrol head. She's got gasoline flowing through her body. And she knows it. She knows it. Because when electrification hit, she understood, wow, I will need to rethink. I will seriously need to reimagine a future for General Motors. And what she did, together with her marketing leader, is create and articulate this incredible vision. And I call it incredible, the 000 vision, because it has everything I like about a real good vision articulation. It's so simple, it's so memorable, it's so compelling for all her stakeholders, not only internal colleagues, but for all her stakeholders. So once we have done that, articulated that vision for the future, then it's about saying, well, what role in that future do we want to play? What's our aspirational role, aka our purpose? And again, look at the stats. At overperforming companies, people are so much more proud of the company. And I've taken Nando's here, Robert Brosin, he was mentioned earlier. I mean, this guy is, and trust me, I'm not using this example only in South Africa. What he's done with, the disability confident, with the dementia-friendly squares, pushing local artists, and one of the things I like most is the no chucking our chicken against food waste. I mean, this is they live it. They really do. And that's what overperformers do. That's what overperformers do for their own people and for others. Truly live that. But maybe not so much in South Africa, I'm not sure. Definitely in the US and in other parts of the world, purpose has become a little bit of a contaminated word. It's basically been pulled into the woke, and it's about the guys that want to save the world and don't care about business. So what we don't like using the purpose word so much anymore, because I think it's deeply misunderstood. Purpose needs to tick 4 boxes. You see them on the screen. There's a fantastic book written about it by Hubert Joly. It sits at the intersection of what the world needs, of what you're good at, how you can make money, and what your people are passionate about. Now, if you're let's say, Amazon, and your mission is to be the most customer-centric company on the planet, you'll skew to the right, to the competency-centered purpose. If you're Mars, and it's all about your values, mutuality, etc., and it's much more about your culture, you'll skew to the left. If you're Patagonia, and it's your mission to save the home planet, surely you're going to skew towards what the world needs. It doesn't mean that Patagonia doesn't know what it's good at. It doesn't mean that they're not doing what their people are passionate about. And it definitely doesn't mean that they don't know how to make money. They're actually a very successful, business-wise, very successful company, because they understand that their purpose needs to cover all 4. Now, you can articulate it. The real difference is obviously in implementing it. And I gave the Nando's example, but it's all about using that purpose to truly guide your decision making. But it's not just a rational thing, it's also an emotional thing. People need to connect with it at an emotional level, and actually even more so at a gut level. You know, it's about will. I will stand by my athletes, is what Nike says. You know why? Because they're all about athletes. They believe that if you have a body, you're an athlete. And their purpose is to inspire athletes and ignite athletes all around the world. So when Colin Kaepernick knelt, they stood by him, full well knowing that there was going to be major pushback in the US, and we've seen it, that some people would ditch and even burn their shoes. They're about athletes. It was true to them. Remember, ground in who you are. They can do it. They did it, and they should do it because it's true to their DNA and to their purpose. When ABI, with Budweiser, I don't know if you've heard anything about how they jumped very, opportunistically a discussion on gender roles and so on. It had nothing to do with the brand, and it truly backfired. They lost their number one market position because it wasn't true to who they were. Okay, we've grounded, we've reimagined, defined our role. Now it's about focusing and driving transformative change. Focusing sometimes means focusing on one shareholder, or in the case of Amazon, the customers. I mentioned that before. But it doesn't mean that we need to articulate all the shareholders that we create value for. It needs to be an integral story, and this is a beautiful piece of work that Said Business School did for us, based on 100,000 social media posts by companies. And they looked at the words that they were using, and you see them on the left. And what we saw, that overperformers were talking about all these things like growth, stakeholder, profit, engagement, in an integral way. It's one story. Whereas underperformers used them separately, and more importantly, used them in the context of words like work, team, business, career, and opportunity. In other words, they were talking about engagement and impact when they were recruiting. I mean, that's greenwashing to me. And that's what underperformers do. They don't have an integral story, they just opportunistically use those words. And what you then happen is that you're like playing whack-a-mole. I don't know if they have it here, but these moles pop up. You got to hammer them down. You're in a reactive mode, extinguishing fires left and right. That's not focus. Focus is an integral story, an integral strategy, and very clear choices. Also about what you not do. And I'm going back decades in time because I just love this example of Steve Jobs. When he took back the reins at Apple, he drew up this 2x2, and of the dozens and dozens of innovation projects, he slashed all but 4. And he said, we can't focus on more than 4 things. That practice is still live at Apple, and we know what it led to. So after grounding, reimagining, and focusing, it's about organizing. Organizing, understanding that if we really want to drive value for all stakeholders, it's about systemic change. And systemic change means that you've got to realize that we need each other. It's not us marketers by ourselves. We need to collaborate. We need to bring down those damn silos. And look at those stats again. Working interdependently at 2/3 of overperforming companies and less than 10% of underperforming companies. This is a statistic from a few years back. My guess is that that's probably changed even more over time. We researched more than 80 million LinkedIn connections. And what we found was shocking. It was shocking in a sense that when we looked at overperforming companies, because we selected a number, And we looked at their connection, the connections of marketers at overperforming companies with their other functional peers, finance, IT, HR, you name it. They were 3.5 times more connected with those other functions than underperforming companies, than marketers at underperforming companies. When we looked at senior leaders in overperforming companies, they're 5.5 times more connected with their junior colleagues. 5.5 times. What's that tell us? Not per se that you now quickly on LinkedIn connect with your junior colleagues. What this says is a mindset. It's a mindset, hey, I want to connect with you, you intern or whatever newbie here in the company. I want to connect with you, I want to talk with you, I want to work with you, I want to collaborate because I need you and you need me. That's the mindset. That's the overperformer mindset. That's what you can do. And marketers, more than anybody else, need to be the spider in the web of this value creation for all strategy. It's not only internally, obviously, it's also externally. This is a collaboration between Walmart, unlikely between Walmart and Patagonia, and Nike even joined very quickly after that. It was about ESG measurement systems. We don't so much see difference between under and overperformance. Apparently they all do this. We do see some difference between over and underperformance in working with NGOs and governments and so on. This is a beautiful example in Turkey, where Turkish Telecom, and admittedly that used to be a government body, worked with the education of ministry to help and support the visually impaired and blind people, and offered audiobooks for free on dedicated numbers for those visually impaired people. Well, now we're at the last and I guess most important part. In Ground, your role is to open those windows and create that vision for the future. In Reimagine, I mean, that's about creative thinking, about articulation, about vision. If it isn't us, I wouldn't know who. In Focus, being brutal in what to choose for. It's not our strength, our core strength. It's a muscle we will need to train. And Organize, I think our role as marketers more than anything else, be the spider in the web, connecting the dots. So the last, Unleash, is not so much about you and the marketing function, but it's about you as an individual, as a leader. So together with Spencer Stewart and the B team, we looked at the profile of overperforming leaders. We looked at the why, the what, and the how of overperforming leaders. The why, the purpose, or the ikigai, as we like to call it, but forget it. It's basically, remember those 4 circles that I showed for the company? What the world needs, what you're good at, what you could get paid for, and what you're passionate about. That same model you can apply to yourself. We take people in retreats to Panama to think for a week full about what their ikigai or their purpose is. That's at the very, very heart of you as a leader. So my invitation is have a look at that, and what is that for you? Overperformers are very clear about that, overperforming leaders. It's also about behaviors. And there's skills and behaviors that just come with a responsibility. I just laid out what it is that marketers can do. It's not easy, by far not. Therefore, things like building talent, leading change, acting strategically, almost come without saying. But what I want to focus on now in the last 2 minutes of my story is the attitudes. What kind of people are those leaders? I've taken a few leaders from your country because I think there's an amazing amount of inspirational leaders with exactly the Da Vinci attitudes, as we call them. The first one is open-minded. And you probably know this woman, Chantal Sambono. She's the daughter of the founder of Chicken Licken. And this is a screenshot of a speech or a video she created after she was elected Marketer of the Year. And the words she's talking about consistently throughout that video are tolerance and respect. I call that open-mindedness. Her father would have undoubtedly be incredibly proud of what she's achieved and is still achieving. But the interesting thing is, tolerance, respect, open-mindedness, she doesn't only talk about her and what she wants her team to stand, but also brings that to the brand. And that's what high-performing leaders do. Courageous. Dangote is a Nigerian businessman. You've probably heard of him. At the year of 8, he was already making money by selling candies or buying candies and selling them with a slight profit at the year of 8. But after he got a loan from his family, he really started building a business, diversified left and right, and it became a significant business. But then his real big bet came. And in Nigeria, which we probably know is very oil-rich, there was no own oil refinery. And he said, that's where I'm going. And after many years of pushbacks and hurdles he had to take and people trying to stop him left and right, he persisted. He had the courage to persist in this big, bold bet, and he made it. He is now not only, $11 billion or something he's worth, he's also the biggest philanthropist of the African continent. An incredibly courageous leader. Somebody that I liked the story, and it became a bit personal, Robert Brosin, the founder of Discovery, and my hotel is actually opposite the Discovery offices. It is impressive. But what's even more impressive is what's at the root of this story. And you know probably the brand and the Vitality program. Basically, it's all around the positioning of helping people lead healthier lives, and as a reward, their insurance premium goes down. That's a very simple yet effective approach. But I've talked to the CEO of UK, the Vitality Group, also in the US. You should look at those websites. This has become a global group and movement. And what's so amazing, what really touched me is, the incredible sense of optimism what we can do, and it starts with ourselves. So in their signature on their email, for every employee, it says, are you bronze, silver, gold, or platinum, or whatever the range is. In the Vitality program, so they don't only do it they start doing it for themselves. If you look at this guy, by the way, he looks like a movie actor. He's fit as nobody else. For him, it's easy, but everybody in the company joins. They believe in it. They have that future. We can change the world, starting with ourselves. And the last one is authenticity. And listen. I sat with Kenzie and Marcel Marcondes. I don't know if you know who he is. He is the global CMO of ABI, Anheuser-Busch InBev, the largest beer company, owner of SAP. And I had Kenzie and Marcel next to me in Cannes, and we had 200 of the most influential marketers of the planet at our campus, at the IRG campus. And the two of them, and my conversation with them was the end. And I mean, I'm getting goosebumps thinking of Kenzie's story there. That was so incredibly touching. Her life journey, the struggles she had to overcome, the emotion which she had the courage to display. Not one of those 200 leaders was not deeply touched, inspired, and affected by her, as was I. And the reason was because it was 100% authentic. There was not like this bit of, acting there. And I thought, wow. So if you have 200 of the biggest marketers in the world, and you really touched them, inspired them, and they all came back to her and then to me to ask more questions. So, you're going to have that effect on your colleagues as well. And I thought, well, if she can do it, why can't we all do that? So I think that's where I want to end, because I laid down the approach and I said what marketing can do. But in the end of the day, my invitation, my call to action to you is to take a real deep look in the mirror and ask yourself, can I be, or why can I not be, that future-focused, optimistic, courageous, open-minded, and more than anything, authentic leader? Because that's what it takes to drive more humanized growth. Thank you very much for your attention.